Okay, and here comes your screen. Okay, so we started with this last time. Say, got you. Good people, Minal, Adina, Rahila, and this girl, Laksa. Yeah, all of you are right. People who do not study habitually, please, you can look at the chat section. Your class fellows are quite right. For the question that I put in the beginning of the class, I asked you to differentiate between audiolingual method and SLT. Now, in the last class, we started with the oral approach and situational language teaching, which these names can be combined to, as you are looking at the slide, but they are separately called as either the oral approach or the situational language teaching, and both are similar. Okay. Now, this approach lies closest with audiolingual method. And if you look at the dates also, they were developed almost during the same time. Okay, that's why you will find many similarities, even in the approach, also even in the theory of language learning too. There are many similarities, but what the differences you can find in your chat section also. It was the difference of the places that the two these two methods were being developed. Audiolingualism, as we know, it developed as an Army specialized program in the universities of United States of America, right? And it was developed during the war times. But this approach, the oral approach and situational language teaching, basically was developed in Britain by the British linguists, and two of the linguists that we talked about last time also. One was Palmer and the other was Hornby, right? Other than that, there are many similarities in the techniques that a teacher uses while using this approach, oral approach and audiolingualism, to teach the second language. In our context, of course, it's English as the second language. We will see a lot of repetition and a lot of practice, all of that. We're going to go with that also. But firstly, I was telling you about the differences. We'll see the similarities, the number of similarities in the approach and the techniques. But other than the nationalities, the countries that these two methods were developed, the other difference was of the contrastive analysis. Okay. So in audiolingualism, it was believed that if we work on those areas of the language which are different in the two languages, then language learning could become easier for the students. But there wasn't any such belief in the situational language teaching. Okay. They did not work on the differences, basically, right? Other than that, we saw that audiolingualism started with the dialogues, right? It did not pay any attention to reading. We did not see the teacher selecting any particular text to read, right? But in SLT, we'll see that reading is important, and this approach is as this the term tells you that this is oral approach. Of course, the emphasis would be on speaking skills and making students communicatively competent. Other than that, we'll see that this approach is more elaborative in the sense that it would work on all the four skills of the students. Okay. All the four skills of language. For instance, we'll see reading is emphasized, writing, speaking, and listening, of course. So then another difference that we will find, and we have already talked about, this method is very organized. Okay, it comes up with its own books, it comes up with its own dictionaries, it comes with its own grammar books also that are developed especially for this method. Okay, whenever English would be taught through this method, then those reading material would become part of the class. Okay, would become the design of the class, right? So a particular syllabus is followed. Otherwise, in audiolingual method, we saw that the teacher creates creates dialogues for the class to practice. Okay, and then they overlearn the language. Um, so these are the differences, but basically you will find while we would be doing some of the techniques, you will find a lot of similarities even in the principles too. Okay, and of course after GTM, um, the focus of language teaching moved um, from grammar to communication. Communication became very, very important, and we'll see that in most of the methods that we're going to do, the aim of the method is to make the students communicatively competent. Because then there was a realization that, you know, language is speech, and if the students are unable to become proficient in a language, then there is no use of language teaching. Okay, so this belief was carried on from one method to another, and I told you that these methods actually work towards making students communicatively competent in real life situation, which did not happen through the direct method. Okay, there was a realization that the students who were taught through direct method did not become uh, communicatively competent, were not able to converse in real life situations. Okay, they only knew whatever was taught to them in the classrooms during the direct method. Okay, they might know the language because of course they were taught in a better way, things were demonstrated to them, vocabulary was demonstrated to them, but knowing the vocabulary only did not do much good to the students' communicative ability, right? That's why there was a need to develop a method which can make the students very much automatic in their responses. Okay, and similar beliefs and similar practices we noticed in audiolingual method. So this is a method which is very close to audiolingual method, except for the differences that we have just discussed. Okay, so we'll see. I've already told you that American Streamline is one of the book from the syllabus of the situational language teaching, this which is being used in many of the institutions, language institutions here, language centers, and those people might not know that they are using the syllabus of situational language teaching. Okay, they have only chosen the book. Otherwise, in its course outline and in its syllabus, Palmer and Hornby have made available the dictionaries and the grammar books too. Okay, so we already, this is the same period of audiolingual method. Who's this? You really scared me from your home sounds. Okay. Some families are, they are real fighters. Anyway, getting back to, getting education, which would make us less fighters anyway. Okay. So, right, we were here. So this is almost the same time of the Second World War and the audiolingualism, 1945. Okay, and then I told you that the method lived only for like 20-30 years. So the development of this method and the use of this method, almost they were at the same time, happening at the same time, the audiolingual method and SLT, right? Okay, Now, um, talking about its background, right? We already know these two British linguists. They are the pioneers and the leader of this movement. Then we talked about the ESL or EFL textbooks also. We know about one of them. I don't know if you know about the other two. I have not seen. I've seen this one. Okay. Other than that, we know the difference between direct method. We don't need to differentiate because these are different methods. Okay. Now, because we have books and we have dictionaries, we have grammar books and we have dictionaries actually developed for this method alone. So uh, that's why we talk about vocabulary control also and the grammar control also. Now, why this is important is that these British linguists actually worked on the words that are used very uh, commonly in a language. Okay, in every language there are most commonly used words, right? Now, when a language is being taught for the purpose of everyday communication, then there is no need of learning difficult kind of vocabulary. Okay. Um, if someone is really good at vocabulary, they know a lot of difficult words or advanced kind of words, or the vocabulary is they have advanced vocabulary. It's only useful for reading of literature or writing well in the language, which of course isn't the basic aim of all these teaching methods. Okay. Second language teaching basically focuses on developing communicative ability of the students, right? So these linguists, Hornby and Palmer, actually researched on English language to come up with the words that a learner might need in usual real life situations. Okay, that is why they developed a separate dictionary for this, right? Other than that, what kind of structures or patterns would be useful for the students? They develop grammar books for this, right? Someone is saying something. Okay, are there some girls waiting? Let me check. No, there are no girls in the waiting. Okay. If there are girls, my screen blinks and I usually admit them. Like it might take 3 to 4 seconds, but I do that. So Ella Rizwan, please mute yourself. Okay. So this is what is meant by vocabulary control and grammar control, that only such vocabulary would be taught to the students which would be helpful to them in real life communication, and this vocabulary is not separately taught to them as a list of words like we noticed in GTM method, but this vocabulary would be taught to them through reading. Okay. Now, why the vocabulary would be taught to them through reading? This is my question, for which you can go to your chat. Okay. Why vocabulary through reading? Why teaching vocab through reading? Right, Minal is right. Okay. Yes, actually reading embeds the context. Okay. Every reading has a context to it, and the vocabulary that is being used give students a situation to use that particular vocabulary. Okay. Aksa is right. Farwa, you are also right, but basically see, the name of this approach, the situational language teaching. So if the vocabulary is taught to them, out of situation, then it does not fulfill the purpose. Okay, vocabulary would be taught, but not through the literary passages, because literature has the advanced kind of vocabulary, and many times that vocabulary is not used. It must be your a common experience also. You may have a very good vocabulary of a particular language, but then you don't need those words every day in everyday life, in your communication, maybe in the classrooms also. You do not need them. It might be useful for you while you are writing your exam papers. It might be useful for you when you're doing your assignments, but these have not been the goal. This assignment or writing your terms paper has never been the goal of these methods, right? So that's why they would learn the vocabulary through reading, but that would be the simpler kinds. Okay. Naila saying yes, students. Okay, they learn words through reading also. Huh. Yes, you're right. You're right. Okay. You actually learn vocabulary from listening also and from reading. And much of the time, because second language speakers are not available to you. Whenever you're learning the second language, it happens in many of the situations the speakers are not available to you, or you do not get an environment where the second language is being spoken and you have a good exposure of the language. So the exposure that you get of the language, if we talk about English specifically, it's through reading. Okay, through reading you learn the language, you learn the vocabulary. Okay, and you watch the movies also, because you through those movies you listen, otherwise you don't get to listen to the native speakers. Okay. Vocabulary to hai focus. There are two focuses. There are two aspects of this, or maybe, but there is, of course, there are two aspects of this method. But what should remain as a matter of emphasis is the situation. The language has to lie in a situation, and the students need to know what kind of language or what patterns they can use in a particular situation. Okay, right? So reading to learn vocabulary, reading to learn the patterns. Okay, it might be part of the conversation, right? Okay. So of course vocabulary is important, because without words how would they speak? And they are going to emphasize on reading skills for language teaching, but basically this reading is just not to develop the reading. As I told you, that this method is a little elaborative, in the sense that it's going to focus. You will see that the method focuses on all the four skills, right? But with a different purpose. Okay, reading skills, of course, a goal of language teaching learning, but reading skills for vocabulary also. Okay, reading skill as a skill, and reading skill for the purpose of teaching vocabulary. Now these are the guides. These are the books that were developed for this method. One is the Interim Report on Vocabulary Selection. This is by Palmer. And General Service List of English Words. This is by West. Okay. Then in Grammar Control, I told you that it believes in universal grammar. We have already discussed that all languages, underlying structures are similar. All languages are based on a grammar which is called as universal grammar, and in this universal grammar, the superficial structures or the surface structures might be different for all language as system. We say that languages are systems. Okay, for all systems the surface structures might be different, but the underlying patterns or the underlying structures are similar. This is the difference between audiolingualism and SLT. SLT believes on commonality between languages, okay? Whereas audiolingualism believes in the differences. If the differences would be worked on, it would be easy for the learners to learn the language. And here in SLT, it is a belief that grammar is significant in all the languages because all languages share universal grammar. And that's why, you know, it is easier for students to learn the grammar, right? So this grammar would be taught through the substitutions also, and they are going to internalize the rules of English sentence structure, okay, as it would be in their syllabus. So these tables would be there, but what is different from the audiolingual method again is that here they need to internalize the rules for correct utterance of the patterns, sub patterns or sentences as you would call, because in audiolingual method we call them as patterns. Okay, let me admit some girls. Right now, these are the dictionaries and the books that are actually made for this method. Advanced Learners Dictionaries, Hornby, and then there's a Grammar of Spoken English, Palmer, Handbook of English Grammar, and then the Guide to Pattern and Usage in English. This is also by Hornby, right? Now let's finally come to the characteristics or the principle of this method. Now, language teaching begins with the spoken language, okay? This is also the common belief between the audiolingual method and SLT, that language teaching cannot be without the spoken language, right? And the use of the target language, which is of course common in direct method, audiolingual, SLT, and any method other than GTM. Most of the method, I do not remember any other method right now except for GTM where mother tongue is given importance or mother tongue is used, right? So the target language is the language of the classroom, which is similar to audiolingual and direct method, okay? New language points are introduced situationally. This is what differentiates SLT from the audiolingual method, that it is going to introduce a number of situations, okay? And all of whatever structures are introduced are situated in a situation, right? Certain procedures are followed and there is a selection of vocabulary, okay? And this selection of vocabulary again goes with a particular situation. Now, items of grammar are graded following the principle that simple forms should be taught before the complex ones. So random grammar is not taught. In the rest of the method, we saw that someone was teaching the phrasal verb, someone was teaching, you know, something else through the fill in the blanks, direct and indirect mass nouns and the count nouns. So whatever structure the teacher wanted to teach, she used to teach. But here in SLT, the grammar is graded, okay? By gradation, what is meant by gradation is that it is going to, actually organize the grammar. The simpler structures would be taught first, and then the teaching would move, or the lessons would move to a little complicated structure. But teaching would never be random in this method, okay? And this method being organized is the differentiating factor between this method and the other methods, okay? Now, it would start with, speaking, but then reading and writing are introduced once the students have sufficient vocabulary and grammatical basis are established, okay? So vocabulary to read and reading to learn vocabulary. It is both ways, right? And writing would come in the end, we would see. But as I told you that this method focuses, of course, as the title tells you, it's on the oral approach or the speaking skills, but it develops all the skills. It works to develop all the skills. Let's talk about the approach. We see two things while we are discussing the approach for any method. One is the theory of language, and the other is the theory of learning. Let me admit some of your class fellows. Okay. Now, as far as the theory of language is concerned, this is just exactly like audiolingual method. The theory of language is structuralism. In structuralism, we would see, it's all these are all the contents of syntax. Okay, the patterns, the building blocks that we have talked about in audiolingual method. And of course, the theory of language, both the methods shared the same theory of language, that is structuralism, structural view of language, or the structures of the language. Word order, the order of the building blocks as we call them in audiolingual method. Structural words, the words that form the structure of the sentence. Few inflections of English. And do you know what are inflections? What are inflections? What are inflections in English? If I give you a hint, it has to do with morphology. Inflections. What are inflections? If you have done morphology, you would be able to answer. Exactly. This is one of the types of bound morphemes, okay? Like adding an S, okay? Adding ED to make a past tense. Adding LS to change the plural and singular subject, okay? हाँ हो सकते हैं, kind of suffixes also. अरे नहीं यार मिनाल, inflection ये थोड़ी होती है. Inflection is, morphological, like when you add ed to change the tense, when you add or subtract s in order to show the singularity or the plurality of the subject. Okay, of course, Bushra is right. Bushra is right. Like change in the form. Okay. All right. Just not the words, but whenever the forms or the structure would change, it can be change in the subject also. It can be change in the verb also. So all of these are called as inflections. So students are taught about inflections also. And what is the difference between function words and content words? What are content words and what are function words? Yeah, Asma Dutani is right. But I'm talking right now, I'm talking about function words and content words. What are these? Function words are blocked. मतलब क्या blocked? Okay. और content words क्या होते हैं? Come on, people. Everyone should be participating. We have, Serish has answered. I have your chats. I'll give you marks for participation also. And when you download these recordings, you also know who has participated. Naila has given an answer. Walia participates usually. Zehra here. Okay. Naila, have you copy pasted? But this is really informative. Okay, and in simpler words also. Okay. See, function words are those words which are not the vocabulary words, basically. Okay. And content words are actually the vocabulary words. They give you meaning. For instance, here the is a function word. It doesn't have any meaning, but it is part of the structure, right? So content words have meaning, and the other ones are the helping words, you can say, or they form the structure. Without the function words, you cannot complete a sentence. Let's put it this way. But Naila has given you a good definition of it. Content words are the vehicle that carry meaning. They are the vocabulary words, right? And function words are the glue that helps the sentences stay together, right? So the function words do not have meaning. They do not have the vocabulary. They only function as um, getting the blocking this building blocks together, okay? For instance, here, the and of are the function words, okay? Otherwise, we have a meaning of you, we have a meaning of inflections, and we have a meaning of English, right? So I've just given you examples, whatever was in front on the screen, okay? Let me check if someone is saying something, we can move forward. हाँ, ठीक है. हाँ, जो ये फंक्शन वर्ड्स होते हैं ये ग्रामेटिकल होते हैं. Structural and grammatical, right? Articles होते हैं, prepositions होती हैं. ठीक है. Okay. Anyway, so this is what we are going to focus here. So, meaning thereby that grammar and vocabulary both are focused. Okay. So, and of course, the approach as far as the theory of language is concerned, it's structuralism, and these are the people known for the theory of structuralism. One is Firth and one is Halliday. The theory is derived from them. As far as theory of learning is concerned, for SLT, it's again behaviorist habit learning theory. And we know that according to behaviorism, humans are considered as organisms who show certain behaviors with certain stimulus, and these behaviors are called as responses. And when these responses get a positive reinforcement, they become habit. Okay, so it works with habit formation and habit learning theory, right? So primarily processes rather than the conditions of learning. So it's basically seen as a process. Learning is seen as a process. What kind of process? You can say as a habit formation process or a rote learning process. Okay, it's not about what are the conditions that are given to the organisms according to the behaviorist theory, but what habits are being formed as a process. So language learning, according to SLT theory of learning, it is seen as a process. And what kind of a process? A process of forming the right habits. And what do we mean by right habits when we are talking about language learning and behaviorism? Learning the right structure and learning the correct pronunciation. These are called as the right habits when we talk about language learning through behaviorism. Now, see, we saw that the theory is structuralist, okay? The focus is on grammar, but the teaching of grammar stays inductive. They get to know the rules. They are not going to learn the grammar without the rules. They are not going to get the rules, but inductively, okay? See, grammar cannot be ignored, and in no method we saw grammar being ignored. Of course, grammar forms the basis of any language, but the approach to learning grammar has been different. But this learning of grammar in audiolingualism and in SLT are both inductive. Okay, They're going to learn through examples, but it is also necessary that they finally find out the rules also. Okay, and then they would learn the rules, and then they would practice it similarly. Now in design, we already studied in the initial classes that design has within itself, it has everything. Whatever happens in the classroom is the design of the method. It has its objectives, it has its syllabus, it has the activities, learners, teachers role, instruction material. All of this forms the design. We already know this. But what are the objectives and what is the syllabus? We are going to look at that. Acha, Akshay is asking, I want to ask, in SLT method, both the approach are used. Both the approach means approach consists of two theories. If you have attended the lectures before we started the methods, we talked about approach, method, technique. Okay, we also talked about the design, right? So approach has two theories. One is the theory of language, and one is the theory of language learning. Now, I cannot revise all the theories of language and all the theories of language learning. Okay, but what I can tell you right now is that approach is the theoretical underpinning of any method. Okay, the theory that formed the basis of an approach, of a method, sorry, the theory or theories that form the basis of a method is called as approach. An approach basically has two theories or two kinds of theories. One is the theory of language, and the other is the theory of learning. And in every method, we try to, try to find out the approach through these theories. I hope I've answered your question. Okay. Both the approaches, you mean? Okay, you got it. Right. Now we are going to do the design, and all of these are the constituents of a design. Whenever we are talking about a method, we talk about design, or जब हम design की बात करते हैं, we talk about all of these. We talk about material, teacher's role, student's role, its objectives, and all that. Now, I already told you that the prime objective of this oral approach or SLT is all the language skills. Okay, reading, writing, speaking, listening, all. But basically, the focus is on speaking, and all the other skills would be learned along with that, right? Now, when we say that it's an oral approach, that is, the speaking skills would be developed. That means there is a need for accuracy in pronunciation. Okay, and when we say that this skill would develop the writing skills also, or this approach would, this method would develop the writing skills also, so we mean accurate grammar. Okay, so accuracy in pronunciation and accuracy in grammar both remain the focus of this method, because it aims to develop all the skills. Okay, errors are to be avoided at all cost. That is what the behaviorism theory tells you, that bad habits should not be formed. Okay, good habit means the correct language habits should be formed. So errors should be avoided at all cost. Errors should not get a positive reinforcement, right? Errors should be such habits that should be suppressed, that should be discouraged. Okay, right? And then of course, when we talk about behaviorism, we talk about stimulus response chain. There is nothing between a stimulus and the response. So we need to develop automatic control of basic structure and pattern. The speech of the learners should become automatic. Whenever they are given one structure as a stimulus or one dialogue as a stimulus, they should automatically utter the next dialogue. Okay, if I give you example here, for instance, greeting. If someone says good morning, that's a stimulus. So the reply should be good morning. Okay, that's a response. If someone says how are you, as a stimulus, the response should be I'm fine as a response. Okay, so this should become very automatic uh, for the learners, all these basic structures. So basically this method works with the basic structures and sentence patterns. Okay, because it's about for daily communication. Now, what kind of syllabus? Of course, the structure syllabus, and there is a list of words, which I told you have been developed by Palmer and Hornby after the research on what are the common words that someone might need on the daily basis. Okay, what kind of activities we would see? The activities are very similar to audiolingual method. New sentence patterns, drill based manner of practicing. We have already done this. Chorus repetition. In substitution drill, if you remember, single slot substitution and then multi-slot substitution. Other than that, when the teacher, it's Sally and Bill, they keep on repeating this. So this is chorus repetition, right? And then there is dictation uh, for both activities. Listening, in order to improve the listening and the writing. Okay, control oral based reading. I told you that the material is already developed, and that is very situational, and there might be writing tasks also. Okay, we will look at these activities from the book, right? Okay, now learners role. Learners have the same role as they have in audiolingual method. They actually follow the teacher. The teacher acts as a model, okay, for all the structures and for all the pronunciation that they are learning. Teacher acts as a model, and these classes are teacher centered. Learners have an active role in the classroom, but they actually are following the teacher, right? So in the initial stages, they are just repeating and listening and whatever the teacher is saying. They respond to the questions, and they do not have any control over the content. The content is already prepared. Even the teacher doesn't have a role on the content of learning, right? She might select things from there, but this is what the student role remains. They follow the teacher, they listen, they repeat, they respond to the commands, and they have no role. Later on, they have active participation, but still they would follow a certain syllabus and the course. They do not have control over the contents. Okay, so what kind of a role, overall role of the student is that students are active, they're not passive. Okay, like we saw maybe in the grammar translation method, and to a great extent in the direct method also. Here in audiolingual method as well as in SLT, we see that the students are very active. Okay, now they're being active, they are actually following the instructions of the teacher. Okay, for instance, in the chain drill we saw, and in substitution drill as well, in question answer session 2, they're following the teacher, but they're actively participating. They're not sitting free, they're not doing their activities quietly. Okay, they're not doing the exercises quietly. We see them very active in the class. Okay, other than that, the teacher, the role of the teacher, a model, as in audiolingual method. Okay, skillful manipulator, using questions, commands, produces correct sentences. All of this we have done in audiolingual method. She gives oral practice also. She develops testing and developing language activities. she might she might be review organizer. She might select from whatever is provided in the book by Palmer and Hornby. Okay. Instruction material, we have this, a textbook. For instance, American Streamline. Okay. She can use visual aids. From direct method onwards, we will see the presence of realia somewhere. Okay, we'll see what kind of visual aids or realia the teacher brings in the class here. So she can have charts with her, she can have flashcards, pictures, whatever she wants to have. Okay. Other than that, um, the this method, see, audiolingual remains controlled from the very beginning to the end, but here the students are given certain kind of freedom. Okay, so they start with very controlled practice of the structures to build automaticity, but then while they are reading and they are writing, because the skills, all the skills are being focused, so there's a need to give them a little freedom. So from a very controlled teaching and learning situation, they move to, you know, uh, this reading and writing, where they become a little independent. Okay. Again, we have already discussed that their lesson has pronunciation, repetition, revision, new structures, vocabulary, lots of drill, and reading material which is based on new structure. Reading material, just not the random one, but it is either related to a situation or would introduce to them newer patterns. Okay, so we'll continue with this. We'll see some of the activities actually taking place in the classroom in our next class, which is perhaps next week. Okay, so wait. So I'll see you on Tuesday. If you have any questions, let me check. No, there are no questions in the chat, but if you have any questions, you can drop them in my chat box on LMS. If you have, you can email me sometimes, but I would appreciate if you keep on asking questions during the lecture in the chat section, okay? Right. So please give this method a reading, and